TCI is brought to you by Golden Sense, the Santa Anita Derby winning son of Into Mischief. Look for a fast first crop of runners hitting the track soon.
Welcome to the TCI. John Siegel is on assignment, so filling in his role. I'm Todd Schrupp, in for the Keeneland Winter Meet. That's why I'm growing out my winter beard. It's supposed to be the spring meet. Joining me on the TCI is Joel Cunningham. Joel, good to be with you.
Good to be with you, man.
Okay.
Welcome to the North Pole. Man. I hope you brought your snow boots, and yeah, the beard is very, very apt.
I have to say, the only time, and I've been in for the Keeneland meet now, both spring and fall, for about 19 years. Sure. The only time it's ever snowed was during the spring meet, and we might have that happening again. We'll talk about what that means for the Toyota Bluegrass Stakes when we preview these crucial Kentucky Derby prep races that are coming up. But let's look back at two significant prep races that took place. One a long ways away from here. That is in Dubai. The UAE Derby took place, and it was a record performance on all accounts by Mendelssohn, winning by 18 3/4 lengths. What'd you make of it?
Well, it's great to have you on, first of all, because if you recall last year, you came in on crunch time. Really, those final preps leading up to the Breeders' Cup. So really appreciate your insight now. And Mendelssohn is really a horse that I'm interested to get your take on, because he's really the buzz horse to come out of last weekend, right? Everybody knew about the big pedigree, and they wondered, okay, you know, how would he handle the dirt? And we saw it in a big way here. You see him here putting 18 lengths on this field. Now, I don't think there was much behind him, Todd. The time was impressive. They broke a lot of track records on this day. I think speed inside rail was good. Thunder Snow proved that. So I think, you know, maybe the dramatic 18-length victory, we probably shouldn't make a ton about that. He did get a 106 buyer, and the Ragism was very good. All indication was this was a good performance. The question is, how will it translate to the Kentucky Derby, in your opinion?
Well, look, from the very beginning, and I've watched a lot of good horses come over from Dubai and make an attempt at the Kentucky Derby, I came to this conclusion: we're more likely to have a horse come from the moon and win the Kentucky Derby before they come from Dubai. So as good as this was, and I'm amazed at the number of really good horse players who are saying, I think he's the favorite for the Derby, which he might be. There's no maybe arguing that. But he's going to win easily. I completely disagree with that for a number of reasons. Everything you pointed to about that racetrack, it was a speed bias racetrack. But just go and look at how Thunder Snow was being chased by some pretty good horses, and they all kind of stayed in the same place. It was an absolute conveyor belt. So that's one thing I'd be concerned about. You know, and I think there's also history here as well. I remember Bellamy Road, when he dominated the Wood Memorial. It was kind of a windswept day that day, kind of cold, a track that was very similar to this, and he won off by a huge margin in a fast time. He went in as the favorite and absolutely fell apart in the Derby. I just think Mendelssohn was so over the top there. Here's the other thing, and this is just my own little thing. Let me ask you this question. How many horses going into last year's Kentucky Derby, in the history of the Kentucky Derby, were purchased for $1 million or more? Just starters. There were 17 of them. What horse has won as the biggest purchase price? Do you remember?
Fusaichi Pegasus.
Very good. $4 million purchase. To me, Fusaichi Pegasus is the exception. The Derby's not won by the $3 million baby like Mendelssohn is. So that's kind of my little hang up on him. Nothing, you know, to knock about the performance itself on that day, but I don't see how that translates into a Kentucky Derby win. Am I being too harsh?
I don't think so. And, you know, you talked about, you know, probably wasn't a great field. You talked about the speed by. I definitely think he was on the part of the track he wanted to be on. Sure. That made the win maybe a little more, you know, visually impressive than maybe it really was. But I think the start of the race is key to talk about. And I didn't like how sluggishly he broke. If you watch how he broke with Reride, a North American horse, is not a great gate horse, but he's a North American horse on his inside. Reride outbreaks him. Mendelssohn really has to be ridden hard to get the lead. Having said that, you know, and why I have a big concern about that is in the Derby 20-horse field, not having gate speed, which these Europeans typically don't, he's going to take, you know, the clay clods and the spray, and how will that affect his performance? First-time North American, having to take that tide. I don't think you'll see that 106 buyer performance. I will give him credit, though. They did have to use him quite a bit early in the race. They rid him hard out of the gate. He got in a little bit of a cumbersome spot. I think they had to ride him a little bit more. Then he came back to the rider, was able to switch off, and then go about his business and finish up well. So there were impressive elements of the race, but for me, he needs to be better out of the gate. he's not going to have as easy of a trip in the Kentucky Derby, and I agree he's going to be way over bet. Having said that, I do believe he's a grade 1 dirt talent, and I believe he belongs in the top 10.
You think, listening to our comments, he lost the race by 18 and 3/4 lengths? Yeah. Look, it was a sublime performance, but I don't know. Sometimes I like my horse to come in off a losing performance going to the Kentucky Derby with more ceiling, but Mendelssohn was certainly a huge story of those Derby preps. I was in Florida at Gulfstream Park. It was my first chance to see a lot of those top 3-year-olds up close, and Audible continued his dominant ways. I would look back at the Florida Derby and say, what a setup. 2 dueling leaders, an opening quarter mile in 21:04. I mean, it was the fastest opening quarter mile of the day, and it's a 1 1/8 mile race. But look, he comes through. It's also nice that he is sired by our sponsor, Into Mischief, which is always good. What do you do with Audible? He's had a perfect spring, but we know the Kentucky Derby throws a lot of obstacles in your way.
You know, I don't know what to really make of this horse, to be honest with you, because he's a complete enigma into everything you handicap of a racehorse going into a race. I mean, everybody talked about the works. He was awful in his work against Vino Rosso coming into this, but they've talked about how, you know, he's always been traditionally a poor workhorse, and that's why they've kind of kept him up at Aqueduct until he broke through. You know, you see the big long strides here, and he does look like a horse that's going to run on, which is contradictory to his pedigree. I mean, Into Mischief, those straight race horses, but they're more middle distance type horses typically, and he's out of a Gilded Time mare, I believe, which is more sprint oriented. However, this horse is sort of defying his pedigree, he's defying the way he trains in the morning time, and he shows up in the afternoon. Having said that, Todd, you know, he gets a 99 buyer here, gets a pretty big Briz number here. I just don't know how good the race was. Like you said, it was sort of the racetrack. Everybody knows that, you know, you go to lead at Gulfstream and you usually have the upper hand. I mean, we saw that with Conquest, Big E that, you know, ran Always Dreaming, the Derby winner, off his feet. He got the lead and kept on going around there. So it's very clear that Strike Power and Promises Fulfilled gunned in here for the lead. I think that opening quarter mile, half mile affected their chances. They caved in. But who was going to pick up the pieces after that? You had a horse that just broke his maiden, Hofburg, that was trying to close. You had obviously Audible closing. You had Catholic Boy trying to close, the horse I liked, who bled pretty significantly in the race. So if you give Catholic Boy the excuse, somebody had to pick up the pieces. Audible and a Hofburg, a horse that just barely broke his maiden. Now, he was impressive. He broke his maiden from the far outside at Gulfstream. That was impressive.
You almost felt what I was about to say. I liked Hofburg's performance, and only because what we talked about, Audible, that's as good as I think you're going to get from Audible. And it may be good enough on Derby Day, but the same thing with Mendelssohn. I like to look at the horses in behind. I think Hofburg has more to give. So I understand what you're saying with everything else falling apart. Someone had to get second. But I liked Hofburg second out of there. Should he move on, I think there's a lot of upside with him.
Yeah, I'm a little questioned, too, about, you know, Todd Pletcher's record at the Derby, how his horse would perform at Churchill. And look, you know, it all comes down to the horse. I liked Always Dreaming last year. To me, Audible seems like one of the, what's Todd, you know, was he 2-54 in the Derby? Whatever that number is, it's obviously
the other thing I can't get out of my head, and I know we're talking about them in their 3-year-old season and 2-year-old form, shouldn't necessarily matter, especially with a horse like him. I mean, he couldn't beat New York breds, and so now this horse is going to join Funnyside as the rare New York bred to win the Kentucky Derby. I mean, I hate to take two huge performances and say they're not my horses, but they're not my horses, both him and Mendelssohn.
Well, we haven't liked the Florida circuit all year. I mean, we've talked about how the Californians have dominated the division. There had to be a winner of this race. He was visually impressive again, like he was in the Holy Bull. He just seems to me like that horse going to Churchill, going another 1/8 of a mile. He's a horse that won't be on my ticket.
Okay, so what does this mean for the top 10?
Well, I think you have to have Audible in the top 10 for now just because we're running out of horses. I mean, there's 20 bids, and we'll see what happens this weekend. But Catholic Boy coming off, McKenzie, that was the news of the week for me. The unfortunate injury there with McKenzie having to come off, that really leaves a void in the top 5. I move everybody up a notch. Mendelssohn, I'm going to debut him at number 6 for me. And to me, the way I view him, I had a tricky time trying to fit him into this top 10 because I didn't think it was really fair to put him in front of, you know, my 2 through 5 who are all going to run this weekend or have preps to come. I wanted to kind of see their performance first before I gave Mendelssohn the benefit of the doubt of thrusting him in the top 5. Having said that, I do feel like he's probably a much better talent than the latter part of my top 10. So I think 6 is a good spot for now. And Audible deserved to be on the list based on the fact he's your Florida Derby winner. He comes in off of 2 impressive victories. But, you know, really, I think it's the top 6 right now are pretty strong. and really the bottom half of this list, there's some question marks. There's some real proving to be done.
Well, here's the whole thing. I mean, this list is going to dramatically change after this upcoming weekend because almost half this list is involved in some major Derby prep races. Let's look ahead to the weekend and start with the Wood Memorial up in New York. Great history, but it's also now a grade 2. Still big points on the line. I love what Kieran McLaughlin has done as far as managing the spring for Enticed. After that Holy Bull effort, let's go to New York. And he was great in the Gotham last time out. Does he continue to be as good this time in the Wood Memorial?
I don't see any reason why he won't. He always struck me as a horse that wouldn't handle Gulfstream. He has a higher action, almost looks like a turf horse if you watch him move. And he's a colt that's not particularly quick early. Those horses typically don't run well at Gulfstream. So I gave him a total pass for that Holy Bull performance. I was really impressed with his wide trip last time out. And I don't know what he beat last time out, Todd, but it was a 1-turn mile race. To me, he's a 2-turn sort. So for him to track wide, power away, and basically be geared down the last eighth of a mile, you had to be impressed with that performance. And you have to also say, well, that was the ideal prep. He couldn't have been all out to win that sort of race. Now coming back to the Wood Memorial, stretching back out to 1 1/8, his preferred distance, we know he likes to track. He certainly makes sense as the favorite in here. And I think, obviously, the way he's coming in this race, you have to say he's the horse to beat.
Is the Sam F. Davis going to be a reverse key race? Catholic Boy maybe had that big excuse next time out in the Florida Derby. As you said, he bled. But Vino Rosso was supposed to come out of there and be great, and he wasn't great. Are you giving up on Vino Rosso in the Wood Memorial?
Not at all. And I actually think he could give your favorite. He's the main challenge in here. I mean, I have him in the top 10, and he's really right there, in my opinion, with Enticed. He's a horse I've always liked, Vino Rosso. It's interesting that, you know, he won that allowance race at Tampa and wasn't real brilliant doing it. It wasn't like Always Dreaming's allowance race last year. And so you kind of question, okay, is he just a little bit of a late comer? Or some horses just simply don't like that surface. They ran him back in the Sam Davis. He ran in spots, did not run the turn well at all, then re-engaged and almost caught Catholic Boy and Flame Away last 16th of a mile. And you kind of looked at that race and said, okay, that's the horse I want to take out of there going forward, especially 1 1/8, 1 1/4 down the road being a Curlin. So they put the blinkers on him in the Tampa Bay Derby. He had no speed to run at all. Did not turn in a good performance there. I almost wonder if they would take the blinkers back off of him. They're going to leave him on. Johnny V likes him enough based on the way he's trained in the morning. He outworks Audible, which maybe is not saying a lot given that Audible's not a workhorse.
I mean, Todd Pletcher's conceded that and just as flat out said Audible's not a good workhorse. But yeah, everyone's going to look at that workout and make a lot out of it.
I think Johnny V he's talked about how good of a horse Vino Rosso is training in the morning, how much promise and potential he has. So blinkers stay on in here. He draws outside, 1 1/8. Maybe getting off that Tampa surface is what he was looking for. I think he's a player in here.
Well, and that's the thing. I mean, I'm back and forth on the horse because I love the winner of the Tampa Bay Derby, whom we'll talk about later on in Toyota Bluegrass Stakes. I thought Quip was great in that race and has a lot more to give. Let's go out west. So we go from New York out to California. It's not a deep field, but it has 2 huge horses in it. The Santa Anita Derby has Justify and all the potential. He's finally going to get a test, and what a test he's going to get against Bolt Doro. How do you see these two?
Well, I think this is going to be the prep of the season. You know, I thought maybe Oaklawn could be the path, but once McKenzie went down and that sort of changed Bob Baffert's plans, he's going to run Justified, leading him up out of his own stall. I think is a very probably the best thing for this colt, given that he's really conceding a lot of experience here. Being able to get a final prep in like this, he has to run 1-2, but realistically, if he doesn't run 1-2, he doesn't belong in the Derby anyway. They'll just take him off the trail. But I think it's interesting here. Here's a horse that's just trained unbelievably well. Typically, I'm against these type horses.
Same here.
But he trains so well, and he looks the part, Todd. And I tell you what, coming in this race, I know he has to face a classy horse in Bolt Doro here, but he draws great outside, and I think he has a lot of natural speed, and he's going to be able to get in that long rhythmic stride of his, have probably a tactical advantage over Bolt Doro in here. I think he's going to be tough to catch, and I think they're sitting on this race. If you're a Windstar, and you have a son of Scat Daddy, one of the last sons that has his physical, they're going for the grade 1 right now. I mean, they want to run it in the Derby. I think the Derby's more the plan for Bolt Doro. This horse, I think they want to win a grade 1 race with him right now. So I think they're going to take it to him, and they're going to make Bolt Doro come get him late. And I think he's going to be very formidable to reel in late. And it'll be interesting to see how aggressive Javier Castellano is on Bolt Doro in terms of trying to win this race over Justify. If he tries to engage him early, maybe earlier than even he engaged McKenzie last time, how will that affect both of these horses? Because I tell you what, Instilled Regard is a cut below, but he draws the rail in here, and
he'll be a factor.
All he's going to have to do is fall right out of the gate, stay on the rail. And if they come back to him and they get a little leg weary late, if they engage early, he's a horse that could, with Joe Rosario, I think can come get him late. Even though I don't think he's up to their quality. But again, pace makes the race. So I think there's some interesting elements between those three horses in here. But I expect Justified to be tough to catch.
Yeah, I think the San Felipe will, when we look back at Triple Crown prep season, will be one of the most exciting races. Unfortunately, as you said, McKenzie is now on the sideline. But I walked away from that race saying that was too much. Like at that point in time, to get to the Kentucky Derby, those horses put it all out there. I know Mick Ruiz has said Bolt Doro's gotten a lot out of that. It was no problem. I think we're going to see the after effects of that San Felipe with Bolt Doro in that race. Justify, to me, the modern comparison is that of Curlin. Curlin did not get started until his February of his 3-year-old season. He looked phenomenal in his debut. I think Justify is in that same type of category. So for all this talk about, is he getting started too late and breaking the Apollo curse and the rest of it, I think he's in that category. We're going to find out. The Santa Anita Derby will find out. But I mean, I look back at that campaign of Curlin. He starts in February, runs in all 3 races the Triple Crown, 3rd in the Kentucky Derby, wins the Preakness, 2nd to Rags to Riches in the Belmont. Then he wins the Haskell, and by the year's end, he wins the Breeders' Cup Classic. So you can get started late. And here's the other thing with Justify. We've already seen from Bob Baffert that he can be patient. If a 3-year-old is not ready, taking a look at West Coast from last year, taking a look at Arrogate the year before, they're not going to be forced into the Kentucky Derby. So the fact that he's put Justify on this path tells you everything you need to know. I think Justify, he deserves to be the odds-on morning line favorite for the Santa Anita Derby.
It's high praise.
Yeah.
And look, I agree with you. I mean, you see he's in my top 3.
Yeah.
I am bought in. We've talked about the workouts that he lays down. I've never seen this horse have a bad day. And it'll be interesting to see what happens when he actually gets pressure in a race.
Yeah, no, I agree.
You know, will he cave, or will he prove to have the class?
Physically, he's got the tools, because that's the other thing. I know a lot of people are watching from afar. He races in my backyard in California. Yeah. He's awesome in person. Okay, the best betting race, I think, of the entire Kentucky Derby prep season is going to be in the Toyota Bluegrass Stakes. You had a field of 14 entered. Now you got this whole thing about the weather. Obviously, we can't predict how that's going to turn out, the possibility of snow. But there's no doubt coming in, this is a pivotal race because of his reputation from last year as the 2-year-old champ. Good Magic is the 2-to-1 morning line favorite. What do you do with his first start as a 3-year-old? No one was impressed by it.
I didn't. You can't like it. I mean, particularly, I do think the speed was on that day at Gulfstream. But, you know, you look at Promises Fulfilled and Strike Power, and certainly, you know, they didn't give each other any chance coming back the way they dueled into submission in the Florida Derby. But you expected a champion to show a little more the final 1/8 of a mile. And look, I know they didn't have him cranked for that, but Chad Brown didn't send out a short horse. I mean, they're trying to get a stud deal done on this horse. He's valued in, you know, the 8-figure range. They weren't trying to get him embarrassed in that race. And frankly, I thought the way he finished the last 1/8 of a mile was not befitting of a champion. And to me, now coming in, he has a great work pattern here. Maybe they just underestimated his fitness, or I'm going to give him the benefit of the doubt here. I think he's definitively the horse to beat in here. I think the Bluegrass is interesting on a couple levels. I mean, you have a full field in here. There's a lot of speed drawn to the inside. And first 3 out of 5 horses I see in here, you know, Sporting Chance, I expect him to fully show speed in here. You know, California Night is a horse stretching out. That's a speed type horse. Quip is a horse that is very tactical early. And then you have more speed on the outside with Machismo and some others. So, you know, you start going through this field in a full field, and then you start thinking, okay, what's that track going to be like? I mean, we're talking about getting, you know.
That's the toughest prediction of the weekend.
4, 5, 6 inches of snow potentially. I mean, that track's going to be less than fast. How is it going to play? I think it's worth paying attention to throughout the card, and it's a variable obviously we can't predict right now, but I think it's going to be a fair enough race that I could see the closers really factoring in here. Good Magic for me is a stalking type horse, but the pace comes up too fast and it's a less than ideal track.
But do you think this whole Good Magic scenario is, you know, the lackluster performance to start is all by design? Because he doesn't have to worry about points. He's safely into the Kentucky Derby if they want to stay on that route. I mean, at some point you do pull the plug, but Chad Brown has such a plan, much like his mentor, the late Bobby Frankel, that I don't know, he doesn't seem too concerned. Maybe they don't even need to win the Toyota Bluegrass Stakes and still press on. Don't you think they had that advantage of knowing we've got enough points to get in, so we're just going to take it easy? Or on the other side of things, he's still eligible for an allowance, never won 2 lifetime.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, just a maiden winner. I mean, you believe that. He's just a maiden winner at this point. So I think there's genuine concern. I mean, there's an element to that, you want to, the horse needs to get his nose in front at the wire, and he has one lifetime win. I don't think they're coming up to this race thinking, well, let's run second and go to the Derby and we'll improve our position. So you
think it's all for the win?
I think they've got to try to win this race, yeah. I mean, you mentioned he's a maiden winner at this point. He's a very good horse, but I just can't imagine that there's any mentality of trying to baby him up to third off the layoff in the Derby situation, and you're good with him losing these races beforehand. I just think it's an interesting race because I see speed in here, I see a big field, and I think there's some closers in here that have been ranked on my top 10 sometime throughout the course of the last 3 or 4 months that are pretty nice horses. I mean, Tiz Mischief, he's 30-1 on the morning line. He probably didn't like Tampa, had no pace to run at last time out when they went 49-2 for the half mile and the speed carried. Probably didn't close well at Gulfstream because closers don't close at Gulfstream, still ran third that day. Free Drop Billy, your grade 1 Breeders' Futurity winner. He's a horse that obviously wants the speed to back up to him. Marconi's a horse that they think's a Belmont Stakes type horse for Todd Pletcher. You knew he wasn't going to run well in the Fountain of Youth when the speed didn't back up. He's a one-run closer type. So there are some interesting closers in here, Todd, that to me have enough promise and potential and talent that they could make an impact in here if the speed comes back.
I have to say, I'm a fan of Quip. I saw him last fall at Keeneland. I thought he was going to be a real nice horse the following year. Yeah. I think he's turning into that as the Tampa Bay Derby winner. And I think he's tactical. He can adapt to any situation.
So do you think he can handle the speed in front of him?
I believe he can. Yeah. I believe he can.
He did get a dream setup last time out to be, stalking a World of Trouble's probably a sprinter, and you get to stalk a sprinter through a 49-2 half mile at Tampa unpressured and go by him in the stretch. I thought that was a great setup for Quip. I agree with you. I like his quality. He's a horse that WinStar's been high on. I actually bet him in the Kentucky Jockey Club. Was disappointed in his performance that day because he did not get early position. He did not get the lead. So I was a little question about whether or not this horse is a little one-dimensional. He's got to show me he can handle the heat in the kitchen early and finish off of it.
Okay, I'm just going to say it because I ran into him down in South Florida, and I don't want to be that guy if the horse wins at 20-1 that didn't tell everyone. Ron Palucci loves Machismo, who's 20-1 in the morning line. He says, go back and look at that most recent work, 58-3. I did. It was very impressive. But my whole thing about works this time of year, did you have enough ability to win the race anyway? In other words, okay, yeah, the horse is working great. They're going to run their race. But is the race good enough to beat this field? I think that's where you got to put it all in context. Yeah. You always put it in context. Joel, it's always good to be back with you.
Good time of year, Todd.
Thank you, my friend. Joel Cunningham, yeah, absolutely. So John Siegel will be back at some point from traveling the world, but as gratis to me for being on the TCI this week, he did give me a 4-pack of Chimay. You're the best, John. So for Joel Cunningham and John Siegel, I'm Todd Schrupp. Thanks for joining us on the TCI.